Hello everyone, today I'm going to give you 5 reasons why your IELTS speaking band might not change. A lot of people take the IELTS speaking test several times and they find that they get the same score each time. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why that is. The first reason is the most obvious reason, and that's probably because they didn't practice enough in between tests. Between each test you should practice as much as possible. If you don't practice enough, it's quite normal that your score will stay the same. The second reason is focusing on your strengths. Now I'm going to give you an example of this. Let's suppose that, as you know, there are 4 criteria for the IELTS speaking test, and these are your scores. Let's say you're quite good at fluency and coherence, but your lexical resource, the amount of vocabulary that you know, is just a 6, and the rest are 7. Now this indicates that the test taker might not know much vocabulary compared to their other skills, so that's a weakness. What will happen here is your average will be 6.5 rather than 7. So the lexical resource brings things down. So obviously they need to work on that. And a third reason is, if you look at these topics, these are very, very common topics for the IELTS speaking test. And let's suppose you have your least favorite topics. They might be things like government or fashion or the environment, for example. If you don't know much vocabulary related to these, that indicates that it's a weakness and you should work on it. Now, some people ignore these topics because they don't like studying them. And what might happen is that it might come up in the speaking exam. And the fourth reason is making the same grammatical mistakes over and over again. Or sometimes it's vocabulary. Let's look at the first one. Talking about a house is actually very common in the IELTS speaking test in part 1. So this is the wrong word. A 3-level house is the wrong vocabulary. It should be a 3-story house. Number 2, I used to went to the beach. That's a problem with grammar. Okay, this is the correct one. And the third one, in addition, should be in addition. In addition. So it's with sounds slightly different, doesn't it? In addition to studying English, I also study Spanish. So be careful there. Addition and addition. In this case, it's the pronunciation that's a problem. And the fourth one is I feel very boring when it should be I feel very bored. Now, if you make the same mistakes over and over, your score will be the same. So I'd recommend you to work on those. And finally, the last mistake is that people focus too much on part 1. While part 1 is very important, a lot of the times the examiner will assess you on all parts. In fact, all the time they will look at all 3 parts, and you need to work on all of them equally. In fact, I would recommend spending more time on part 2 and part 3 because they're more difficult. So anyway, the good news is that there is something you can do to improve your score, and I'm going to explain them now. The first is to practice as much as possible. Get lots of speaking practice, practice with your teacher, practice with foreigners, practice with native speakers. Get lots of practice in between tests. The second tip is to try to change your weakness into a strength. So if you're weak in vocabulary, work on your vocabulary. If your grammar is weak, work on your grammar. And the third tip is cover a full range of topics. So if these are your weak areas, government, fashion and environment, work on those more because you never know, they might come up in the exam. And the fourth tip is work on your mistakes. I would say write down the correct version of your mistakes on a piece of paper, even say them correctly. So write and say them. That will reduce the amount of mistakes that you make each time you take the test. And the last tip is work on each and every part of the IELTS exam, especially on part 2 and part 3. Spend more time on those. Try to boost your score. So I hope you found these 5 tips very useful. If you've got any questions or comments, please type them in the comments section below. If you need more videos on a particular topic, I'm open to feedback. Type them below and I'll see if I have time, I'll make them for you. Thank you very much. Don't forget to click like and subscribe for more free videos.